Late night host Stephen Colbert criticized CBS after the network declined to allow an interview with Texas Democratic U.S. Senate candidate James Talarico. Colbert told viewers that network attorneys, citing Federal Communications Commission rules, FCC rules, blocked the appearance. Talarico, a state lawmaker from Austin, is running against Jasmine Crockett in the March 3rd Democratic primary. Early voting began Tuesday. The Democratic nominee will face the winner of the Republican primary in November. That race includes incumbent Senator John Cornyn, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Houston Congressman Wesley Hunt. And joining us now to discuss is Houston public media reporter, one of our faves, Michael Adkison.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, good afternoon.
I kind of set that up with that goofiness of who's having a good week or not. Depending on how you look at this story, some people may have had a very good run with this one.
Well, we had a new development this morning in that James Talarico has said that he has raised $2.5 million in the 24 hours since this interview first aired.
Wow.
So, the Ernie had asked me this yesterday about, what does this mean for Talarico? And I said, this is just a great opportunity for Talarico to be on the national stage. The amount of times Stephen Colbert went on his broadcast and said the name James Talarico on a national broadcast that, to Stephen Colbert's point last night, probably nobody would have watched had this been on the air, but because it became this controversy in this story that a lot of people went online and watched this interview and now are aware of who James Talarico is, and obviously that has resulted in, according to his campaign, $2.5 million.
Well, what we can't have.
Yeah, and I do want to make a note. We have interviewed both Democratic candidates, James Talarico, as well as Jasmine Crockett. You can go to hellohouston.org to find those interviews, and we as well have reached out to the Republican candidates.
So at the end of the day, the FCC fair doctrine rules might have been true that you can have James Talarico on, but you have to have Jasmine Crockett on. I mean, it gets very sticky.
Because
What are the rules, Michael?
Well, talk shows and
Why don't you
news
tell
both
us?
have them.
Well,
Oh, yeah, we have them. We follow them.
There are obviously, we here at Houston Public Media follow
Yes.
the FCC, but
Right.
there are historically exceptions made for talk shows. So that's how James Talarico is able to go on The View. That's how he was able to go on The Late Show. Purportedly, that's how he would have been. But that being said, the head of the FCC, Brendan Carr, has said that he wants to walk back on that exception. Now, that hasn't been codified. That is not the guidance from the FCC, but he has said, I would like to see the talk show exception be walked back. And so that is what kind of is assumed by a lot of media analysts factored into the decision. And that's what Stephen Colbert has said, that, this isn't the law of the land, but CBS is operating like it is. And that's what resulted in this result.
Like you said, it did well for him.
Exactly. That Colbert is obviously getting a lot of attention, and so is Talarico.
in addition to the monies raised, the Google search, there were more searches for James Talarico in the 24 hours, the most searches ever for his name in Texas alone in the last 24 hours, and nationwide, a phenomenal number of searches. So at a pivotal moment when you're going in early voting has already begun, the attention on a single candidate and making people say, well, who is this guy? Let's learn more. It couldn't hurt.
And it made him a news product. And that's why we're talking about him.
Yeah.
So we're saying the name James Talarico a few times also.
Right. And to make a point, we'll throw in the name Jasmine Crockett as well. That one of the questions has been, was this fair to her? And Colbert has said that Jasmine Crockett has been on his show a couple of times. We should say neither of which were during her Senate campaign. There were just prior appearances.
She was on The View not
correct.
too long
Yes.
ago.
And that being said, some reporting, Reuters, I believe, is the one that broke this story, has said that the FCC is beginning an investigation into The View for having Talarico on and not giving equal opportunity to Jasmine Crockett.
But she was on.
So the question is, what does equal time mean? What does it mean to have one candidate with a whole platform? It is this question that kind of is unfamiliar territory for these, national syndicated groups.
And that's what I was going to ask, Michael, bringing it out a little bit. This is not the first time that people are looking at CBS under this new administration, I guess, how we can call it, with Barry Wise coming in. What do you think this says for that network specifically? And what do you think this says about the FCC's interaction with networks in general?
Right. So to take a step back, as you were saying, Celeste, and really look at the power brokers in this circumstance, you've got CBS, whose parent company is Paramount. You've probably heard about Paramount before. They are in the middle of a hostile takeover bid for Warner Brothers Discovery, which is currently in talks to be bought by Netflix. Paramount has made it abundantly clear that they would like to buy Warner Brothers. They would like to be the ones to do that. But with such a merger as this, it's actually going to come down to the federal government to make a decision over whether or not this is a monopoly, whether you can go through with such a merger. And so there's been a lot of reporting indicating that Paramount is wanting to appeal to the Trump administration, who, again, is going to have the final say. And Trump has said that himself. President Trump has said, yes, we will be weighing in on whether or not such a deal can go through. So you do have what a lot of folks have been skepticizing of whether or not CBS is really trying to just appeal to the Trump administration when it's making decisions like this.
So from your reporting, from paying attention as closely as you have to this story, what do you think happened? Do you think it was an overabundance of caution at some level? Do you think there was some pressure put on? Do you think it holds water that you have to have equal time for candidates in the same party against each other at this level?
So I'll answer that in 2 points. The first is I think it would be good to read what CBS, their statement. So I'll read that in full and then I'll get to that question. Okay. So CBS, and this was read by Colbert on his show last night, CBS said that it provided the Late Show legal guidance that the broadcast could trigger the FCC's equal time rule for the two other candidates, including Representative Jasmine Crockett, and presented options for how the equal time for the other candidates could be fulfilled. The Late Show decided to present the interview through its YouTube channel with on-air promotion on the broadcast rather than potentially providing the equal time options. That was CBS's statement. So there's been a lot of questioning over what exactly went down. I will say State Representative Talarico has really said, you know, the FCC doesn't want me to do this interview. And we should make abundantly clear, the FCC, as far as we know, did not make this decision. CBS made this decision, not the FCC.
Right.
And I have asked the Talarico campaign about that, and they have not provided clarification on why they're taking that angle.
That is very important to mention, that it was CBS, not the FCC.
Right.
And I'll go a little deeper. Whether or not it was actually CBS who made the decision or if it was the producers of Colbert who made the decision.
Sure, and that's...
But the question is, was it pressure or was it edict?
Exactly, and obviously we're talking about this not in a vacuum. We are in a world where there is pressure from the FCC for Colbert, who has made no secret that he has left-leaning views, that they have to operate in a certain way. So we're not speaking in a vacuum here. That certainly is the circumstance. But that being said, it does sound like what the lawyers for CBS told Stephen Colbert was, you have options. You will not air Talarico on his own on network airwaves. That's not happening. Your options are you can either air it alongside Jasmine Crockett, as well as another candidate who's polling at 2% at the moment, in a distant third, or you can do this online. You can do this on streaming. You can do this somewhere where it's not going on FCC airwaves. Those are your options. They obviously went with the latter.
They went with, it ended up being on their streaming, right?
YouTube.
YouTube.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you have to ask, though, Michael, who made the decision to cancel Colbert?
That's been another,
and who made the decision to pull the 60 Minutes piece on the jails?
And I don't cover CBS specifically, but that has been it's one of those things to the point of it not being in a vacuum. There's all these chips that are coming into play.
Well, it's always been the conservative broadcast system. Trust me, I've worked for CBS before, and they've always been conservative. But that was what made them great journalists. I thought 60 Minutes is one of the premier investigative show. It sort of set the stage for everybody. Yeah. And now they seem to be really bending backwards for this administration.
I think that there's none of this is happening in a vacuum, as we're saying. That there has been this push from 60 Minutes to, get comment from the Trump administration, or as Sharon Alfonsi has said, that's a sort of kill switch that now the Trump administration has over 60 Minutes is this emphasis on getting all perspectives represented. But let's say, as happened with 60 Minutes, what if the Trump administration doesn't respond? Does that mean a kill switch on 60 Minutes?
Does anyone know, was the Talarico interview live when it was done? I mean, did they have a
audience?
Did anyone see it before it went on YouTube?
I will say I've been to a Stephen Colbert taping a long time ago when I was in New York, and the way that they do it is, they bring all the audience in, and then they kind of just film, and they don't film it in order. They don't film it. They obviously they lay it out in a way on network TV.
What time? Were you there at 5?
It would have been in the afternoon when I did it. Again, this was years ago, but so you have to. There were certainly audience members, and even in Monday night's broadcast, Colbert filmed this saying, he filmed this whole segment saying that we aren't allowed to show Talarico on air, so go on YouTube and watch it. Mm-hmm. So in real time, there was an audience who saw him say that and then knew that this was coming. I'm
trying to determine if someone saw the interview and said, he can't be on tonight. Or did they hear he was coming
It doesn't
up?
sound like
That's
that.
what
When he, it's real quick, that he did in the interview with Talarico, it wasn't an after the fact. He sitting down with Talarico comes in and Stephen Colbert says, so if people are watching this, they're watching on YouTube. Like it was not an after the fact decision. It was a preemptive decision.
So
that was my
then,
question.
I guess then the question becomes, and this might be a little inside baseball within the industry, but what the actual editorial process is, essentially how they structure their workflow and where it got cut. At what level did it get cut? Somebody said we should have Talarico on. Let's have Talarico on.
Somebody booked him a couple of weeks ago.
They evaluated it. Mm-hmm. Talarico had to get to New York. There was a whole process to get him in the studio.
Right.
And so the question then becomes, where in the process did that go?
Yeah.
When
did word come
really was
out?
my
This
question.
is not going to make it to air.
Sure. I will say, my job has been watching The Late Show for the last couple of days. So I was watching The Late Show, and during last night's broadcast, Stephen Colbert made note that, bear with me, during Monday's taping, he is having real-time conversations with attorneys on the wording of what they're going to say. That even he will do one segment and then he will go backstage and the lawyers say, hey, we have new wording on what you should say about this to make sure that we're completely in the clear. And so he has emphasized that every word that he has said on air has been exclusively tailored by CBS and Paramount's lawyers.
Where are we?
Well,
as
we
a
also
country?
know that Tony DeCoppel, is that how you say his last name?
I believe DeCoppel.
DeCoppel. When he interviewed President Trump, we also know that there was audio that was taken where Caroline Leavitt is telling him, we will sue you if that's edited. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily the normal protocol between a presidential administration and journalists.
Hardly.
Yeah. Sure. And, that's a direct result, I believe, to what happened after the 2024 60 Minutes piece, where 60 Minutes obviously has a precedent for every major presidential election interviewing both of the candidates. And they have with President Trump in the past. They did it in 2016, they did it in 2020. And in 2024, he opted not to do an interview. So the whole piece was Vice President Kamala Harris. That was essentially the whole piece. And, they made a note of saying that we extended this invite to Donald Trump and he did not agree. But then Donald Trump obviously sued CBS and Paramount for that piece and resulted in a major settlement. And then days later is when we find out that Stephen Colbert is being let go from The Late Show.
Yeah. I'm not a lawyer, but I do wonder this. If after March 3rd, let's just say Talarico won, and the Republicans were in a runoff for May, could you interview James Talarico all you wanted and not have to interview the Republicans because they don't have a candidate yet?
That's a good question. I think so. I'm
There
not
is-
sure when the equal time
Right.
starts.
There
How many months out before
There is a time limit
Yeah.
between an election and when you have to
Yes, but if there's no
follow it.
candidate from the
Sean
Republicans.
Radigan on YouTube did say, can you imagine Ken Paxton on The Late Show?
I know, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing,
Something I'd
too,
watch.
I want to bring it back to this particular story in that I guess Crockett is saying now, implying, I guess is a better way to put it, that both Talarico and Colbert are lying about this and that they are not being truthful in the way they're telling the story.
And I think that goes back to the idea that State Representative Talarico has said, the Trump administration doesn't want this interview out there. The FCC does not want this interview out there. And as we've said, the decision, as we understand it, came down to CBS and Paramount, not the FCC. That the FCC obviously has what they've suggested in their guidance, but that the decision to not air Talarico came down from CBS. So Congresswoman Crockett, in her first comments on the matter, when I watched that, and we put this in our reporting, that she's held back from directly criticizing what happened. But she does say, as I understand it, this was not an FCC decision. This was a Stephen Colbert decision and the Late Show decision. And she even makes a point that she drew attention to, I will say, that they had the option of bringing her on the show for the equal time, and somebody chose not to. And that's kind of how she puts it, that somebody obviously chose not to, and they chose to just put it on YouTube.
Do we know, is there anything that has come out to say why they didn't just offer an invite to her as well?
No, and that's something that I think
Which would have
Congresswoman
fixed
Crockett
this whole problem.
and has been a big question is what that why that didn't happen, what led to the decision not to just have Congresswoman Crockett on the show. Colbert has said that she has been on the show a couple of times, that she's been on the show before, that hypothetically I think the extension of that argument is that his viewers know who Jasmine Crockett is. They may not know who James Talarico is.
Well, they've gotten almost 6 million YouTube views.
Right.
That's a lot more than they would have seen on The Late Show. That's
Exactly.
for sure. Okay.
What do you think can actually come out of this,
That's a
Michael?
good question. I think, as we've said, the attention that it brings Talarico, who, before, when was the campaign announcement? September of last year. Before September of last year, James Talarico was not a name that was really on anyone's radar outside of Texas politics, and now he's become something of a national figure.
Houston public media reporter Michael Adkison, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank y'all.